Okay, so please join me in welcoming two creative powerhouses. I'm very excited about this because everybody talks about Michael speaking, and he's so funny, and I've heard him before, but it was a long time ago, so I'm happy to hear this too. Please join me in welcoming two creative powerhouses whose work has helped shape the worlds of design and culture. Michael S. Smith, one of the most respected interior designers working today, has brought his signature blend of elegance, comfort, historical depth to homes around the globe, including the White House. We're so glad about that, right? Today he sits down with acclaimed filmmaker and journalist Matt Tyrnauer. I think I said that right. Tyrnauer. To discuss his latest book, Classic by Design. In this rich visual memoir, Michael reflects on a career devoted to timeless interiors, revealing inspirations, philosophies, and personal stories behind some of the most iconic spaces. This promises to be an insightful conversation about what it means to create lasting beauty in a fast-moving world. And I'm super happy to have Michael here too, because he just did this book and he hasn't been speaking all that much yet, so this is great for you guys to be hearing him in one of his first conversations after his book has been out. And that's important to me, and I'm sure it's important to you. So please give them a warm welcome.
Wow, it's very bright up here.
I know it's bright.
It's very bright.
Good.
If I look shiny, you guys will cue me in, right? Okay. Hey, Matt. How are
Hello.
you? Matt Tyrnauer.
Tyrnauer. Yeah.
Tyrnauer.
You got it. You did it. Hi, everyone. We know each other very well.
I've never met you before.
This is rather conversational and not a stiff interview process. I used to write for Vanity Fair magazine, and a piece I wrote was about a woman named Janet de Cordova, who was called the Duchess of Truesdale. She lived up on Truesdale, and she was married to Johnny Carson's executive producer, Freddie de Cordova. And anyway, there was a detail in this long, picaresque story I wrote for Vanity Fair, and Michael, calls me after. He doesn't talk about the bizarreness of this story, which had all these crazy details about her losing all her money and moving to Mexico and living with her cleaning woman and all the Nancy Reagan deserting her. He seizes on this one fact, which is that her decorator was a woman named Mrs. Belzer. He knew that. And that she had a certain type of curtain that hung in her bedroom of the Rex Lottery house. This wasn't in the piece. He knew this about this obscure figure. So I wanted to ask you, because this goes back to LA design history, who was Mrs. Belzer? What were the curtains? And why do you know all this stuff? And how does it fit into your work?
It's a really good question. So Mrs. Belzer was the mother of Loretta Young. It's a very famous actress who had a huge career in movies and then had a huge television career where she would come down the staircase in a different outfit every week to introduce a different, I think, theatrical production, but always in a gown. And everyone's grandparents loved Loretta Young. And Mrs. Belzer was just Gladys Belzer, was a very hard-working decorator. And I kind of, when I was sort of 17, 18 and had summer jobs being a decorator, so 7 or 8 years ago, she was just one step removed from the people I worked for, right? Or that I would, I had people that I would assist when I was 17. And they all kind of knew Mrs. Belzer. And she was famous for certain things. One of them was the curtains, which we'll get to. The other was that she was very famous for, she'd made donkey carts from Mexico into coffee tables. So that was a big thing. So you go to a house and it'd be but she had serious clients. I think she did Edward G. Robinson, the kind of actor who always played kind of mob bosses and stuff, but also had, at the end of his life, the most famous Impressionist picture collection ever. And she just was a serious character who was kind of stylish and great. She had made, with somebody called Robert Crowder, these curtains that were hand-woven in LA, and I think the weaver who had made them we had used him for a long time, and I think he's retired and finished. But what they had done is that they would weave these curtains, and then they would take one strand of marabou feather, of ostrich feather, and they would weave it into the curtains so that when the curtains kind of moved in the wind, it sort of felt like this like feather kind of creation. And I was always obsessed with them. And ironically, it brings us up to something topical, which is the last time I used them, and probably the last time the weaver did anything, was for my friend Elaine Wynn, who just died. So the last application for these curtains was in Elaine Wynn's bedroom in Las Vegas, which felt like a perfect cycle, and it terminates in, we just sadly lost Elaine. So it's the last of the curtains, the last of the feathers, and
Well,
the last of Mrs.
and the reason I started with this was to talk about history and to use a fancy word, historicity, which is like an art history term I remember from college, historicity, because he calls me after this piece and says, I have a piece of the fabric from her curtains in the room, and then I read in Town and Country just a few months ago about the beautiful home he did for Elaine Wynn in Las Vegas, that he used the Robert Crowder fabric in the bedroom, I think, of Elaine Wynn. So for me, that was a wonderful kind of arcing thing for our relationship, but it showed me the depth of research that Michael puts into the rooms. And Elaine was sort of a great lady like Janet. And I just wanted to ask you about the depth of research you do and the thematic nature of it and how you work with historicity in your
that does not sound like a real
and
word.
place.
You guys Google that and make sure.
No, but place. Like, this was an LA glamour room.
Yeah.
These curtains were there. Elaine's environment needed to quote that.
I think it comes from, number one, this, it's funny because this Armani stuff, which is very Mrs. de Cordova, and this, when I put this on, the scarf, I actually thought of Janet de Cordova. It's a very Janet de Cordova idea. I think that growing up here, I was too young. I was at the, kind of the end of certain things, but I knew Michael Taylor, right? I mean, peripherally. So I knew people. It's funny, I just was seeing Rose Tarlow like half an hour ago, and Rose Tarlow has in her shop, if you guys go in there, these giant cupboards, these English cupboards that had been in David Geffen's house, which now belongs to Jeff Bezos. And when they redid the house, Rose took them back, and they're in her shop, and they're amazing. These English, kind of giant English bookcases. And when I was a kid, I was probably 18, 19, I went to see a beautiful house that was very much photographed in San Francisco that belonged to a very famous decorator called Anthony Hale. And they were in Anthony Hale's living room. And so that continuum of history, whether it be decorating or Los Angeles or anything, is something that I'm fascinated by. The kind of pop beads or the Christmas popcorn strings of history I'm obsessed with. So, and I think it gives me pleasure and interest to kind of know how those things work. I also, I was not around screens or technology as a kid because I'm too fucking old, but as a kid I would pore over old architectural digests, and because I have a pretty good visual memory, I still remember specific issues and specific even combinations. Like I can look at the cover and kind of know what was in it. And I think that stuff, that documentation, is always fascinating to me. So to see a table that I bought, or someone just did a column on Instagram, it's like they're called like Joe, you guys might follow them, it's like JOEM or something, someone who's always posting historic rooms, photographed the designer Bill Blass's house, and then showed what stuff was sold at auction, and then showed how I had used it in other rooms, right? So that I love, right? Now the sad thing is history will trample on my dead body and they'll move through me too. But now I feel like I have the power seat, right, for this moment. But I think that kind of idea of, so the point is to answer your question in a long roundabout way, is it's not so much a research, it's just sort of what I'm fascinated by. So how things fit together and the weird tide pools that are created by history are really interesting. And one thing that I always think is true, and you guys are living testaments to this, is that though LA has always had great art collectors, great houses, people who were stylish, because New York controlled magazines, the reputation was we were the hicks. We were like, the wild, wild west, and that there was no chic, beautiful, incredible, fashionable people here, and that absolutely is not the case. And so I, in many things, love an underdog. So I always was going to be pro-California and pro sort of Los Angeles history and design history, because it's absolutely not true. There was, from time, the beginning of time, there were chic, wonderful houses, beautiful, kind of historic stuff. I mean, Francis Elkin, who many people think of as this great decorator and stuff, lived in a kind of incredible adobe house in Carmel or Monterey, and it was like this historic house had been built in the 19th century. So it all kind of marches along, and that's what I find fascinating. And I love when something is not over-publicized or over-saturated or overexposed like Mrs. Belzer. She didn't have her own Instagram account. If she did, we'd have a very different, she'd have a Target deal. But yeah. Okay.
I feel like Mrs. Belzer's donkey cart coffee table set California's reputation back maybe a little bit.
They were kind of
I'd like to see one. Maybe we can go find one.
They were kind of great, actually.
I feel like there's one in a thrift store in Palm Springs somewhere that we could find.
I don't know. She didn't do that many of them. Believe me, they were fancy.
Let me ask you about narrative. It is the case that I've written a few Architectural Digest pieces about things that you've done. One was a house. You're welcome. One was a house in Rancho Mirage that you and James Costos have, and this was a modern Mayan ruin, basically, at the top of Thunderbird Heights. So it's the best neighborhood, and it was probably the biggest house, but it had fallen into disrepair. I remember he calls me one day. It's like, I'm either a genius or I'm insane. I've just bought a ruined Mayan house at the top of Thunderbird. And, lo and behold, 2 years later, he turns it into this extraordinary thing. It's been published many times and is extraordinary. But when I was doing the piece, Michael starts quoting to me from an essay that Joan Didion wrote, and I believe it's in her collection, The White Album, about the style of Mrs. Jules Stein and her house, Misty Mountain, and Didion's observing these things like Phalaenopsis orchids and coffee that was inevitably taken in demi-tasses in the ladies' boudoir and stirred with not teaspoons, but rock sugar that had crystallized on sticks. He's saying, this is the concept for the house, right? It's like, and you'll write something about it, which I did, and you can read about it. But this essay is wonderful in the White Album. Talk about how you pull something from a paragraph in Didion and then transmogrify it into rooms. I think that's fascinating.
You're asking me versions of this. It's great, but it's the same version of the same question. I mean, I think that, again, I was so obsessed with, as a kid, because I lived here, and my grandparents had really pretty houses, and, like they had whatever, really, they were interested in that kind of thing, and I got to see really, I was raised in Newport Beach, so I was a kid at the beach. But when I would come to see my grandparents, I would go to like fancy people houses. And I remember thinking, the ones that were impactful were so odd because, again, it was so under-publicized, right? It was so underexposed, and they were weird, we'd go see cousins, and they were doing smack in the garage, and then there was like tea served on the, it was just like a very weird California post, the tail end of hippiedom. And I just thought it was really interesting. And Joan Didion, who I don't know if you guys have read, but who's such an extraordinary writer about California in particular. And, there's all these weird connections with her, like, Harrison Ford is a longtime friend of ours and a client of mine, and he was her carpenter. That's how he started. He built her house at the beach. So there's just a lot of weird stuff going on at that particular moment. And when I went to school in England, when I was probably 19, the only book I took was The White Album, because for me it was the definitive book about California. It had, and if you guys have a chance to read it, it's a series of short essays she wrote for various magazines, but it's about specific, that kind of time. And again, it's the same thing about Gladys Belzer. I'm fascinated by that time because I was on the edge of it, and it was so interesting to me. And so foreign to me, right? That whole, the chateau and people, kind of artists up there, and this whole, that was so not what I was lived, but I would see it, right? I could see it, and I was at adjacency to it. So that was really just fascinating to me because it felt so otherworldly and glamorous. But the house, I think the reason, what happens with me, which is weird, is that when I do my own things, I'm sure most of you have this thing too, I get really terrified because I think I'm out of sync, right? So the most recent example is, if any of you guys saw this house or this apartment I did for myself in Spain, in Madrid, I had this idea, having lived there for, I'm not that much of my time, but, some time for the last 10, 12 years, of all these things that were being ripped out. And kind of people, the idea is, well, we've lived with all this old stuff and we're not interested in it anymore. So I sort of decided to build, first I tried to find a historic apartment and couldn't find it. It was in the, I found this incredible floor of a palace and everyone was like, oh, that's so great, we'll never visit you. There's nowhere to park, it's in the wrong part of town, whatever. So finally I found this thing, which was great, which was a box. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna build my greatest hits of Spanish houses I've seen, right? So I kind of did that. And I felt insane, right? And I would call somebody like Margaret Russell, who's my friend, who used to be the editor of Architectural Digest, and say like, am I insane? Like, I think I'm out of step with, like, people are gonna mock me and I'm gonna be embarrassed and whatever. And then I sent it to Amy Astley at Architectural Digest and she ran it and it was like a big story and everyone thought it was great. So, but in the moment, I get a little freaked out because I think, not unlike my Palm Springs house, which is everything at the time that I was doing the house in Palm Springs, was mid-century. When I was a kid, no one had mid-century bedrooms. They had kind of fancy bedrooms and 4 poster beds and lots of the same print and stuff. And so for me, I was like, well, that's what I want because that's what felt glamorous to me at the time, right? That felt otherworldly to me. Different than my, bunk beds in my house, in my beach house I grew up in. It was like a whole other fancy world. And so, but again, I always feel like I'm out of step, and I thank God, not would, but thank God, when it's done somehow, it's either cooked long enough and people don't want to embarrass me or mock me. You guys might have different things to say about it, but hold it to yourself. And then, but there is like this kind of, tear, right? I mean, I talk about this all the time. Like for me, good decorating, in particular for yourselves, which you guys all know a little bit, is like stand-up comedy. You're kind of getting up there and you're kind of throwing yourself into what you think you should do for yourself, and you hope people like it, right? It's kind of it's like a leap of faith. And I think the best, most personal houses are that, right? Where you're not conforming to what other people are telling you. You're not in line with, everything is a Jean Pouvet sofa and everything is, a mid-century thing. Like you're doing something that feels different to you and you hope for the best.
Let me ask you about clients, because one thing about your work that I love so much is that when you walk into it or you look in photographs, you kind of really want to inhabit these rooms. They tell a story. They're kind of total design. But I wonder how much you have to teach your clients how to live in such total environments. Because obviously these are big ticket houses, and a lot of people actually who have the means to hire you might not actually know how to fully inhabit the spaces that you're creating. Do you ever have that kind of challenge with a client? You know what I mean?
Yeah, not that often. You were president for one, which we won't never have to talk about, but not that often. I think that people who hire me kind of know what they're getting, and I think that, look, I mean, I think the opposite. I mean, talking about my canons of how to, what's decorating important. I think surprise is the opposite of what I want to achieve. Like, I never want somebody to be like, surprise, here's your house. For all the tear, and like, I never want to, I have one client who's a very famous financial person who hated what I did. And I still have PTSD from it. And, I mean, still. And it was literally like, I love this, I love this, I love this. And then I waited, so we installed the house, whatever, and literally approved everything. And saw everything, and renderings and everything, and called me and said, "Why you didn't listen to me? What's wrong with you? You must be crazy. I hate green. How come there's green?" And I was like, "But you pick green." Like, it was so surreal that to this day, that tension of waiting for somebody to call me after they go to their house is still colored by that tear of like that it's going to happen again, right? And it happened once, but it can be so formative and freaky. But I think to answer your main question, I think that the process is so slow that hopefully people sort of catch up. And what I do, which is slightly, I mean, you're aware of it, and some people know, I kind of teach people by example, right? So I have people, you're often at my house for dinner. I have people to my house for dinner, and my house is run and organized in a way that I can communicate how you should do it too, right? Now, and people get it, right? They kind of go, this is great, this, I like this, it's you know, whatever. And I think part of that, that's helpful. And then I think also, but I do, they are tailored to the people who live in them. I mean, I wouldn't give somebody something that they can't inhabit, right? It would be like making a suit for someone that they don't fit into. So it may feel immersive from the outside or foreign from what you think people are, but it's been tailored for them. So by the time they move into the house, they're comfortable in the house. Yeah. Is that a good answer? Is that okay?
I like that.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think you answered sufficiently, but it's like in LA, I used to live in New York. I've done a lot of work in Europe. Like things are done differently there. There's French service sometimes.
Yeah.
LA doesn't do that,
Yeah.
and I think your houses sometimes command it, and
Yeah.
I think there is a learning curve sometimes.
I think you would be surprised how people rise to the. I mean, again, I don't want to create the illusion or an idea that I make a house and people have to struggle to live in it, right? They have to tread water to live in their house, because I don't think that's true. I think that people come to me with an aspiration of how they want to live in the house, and so the house might be higher than what you think, but by the time the house is done, they're ready for it too.
Yeah, aspirational is a great
Yeah.
word for that. Now, I'm sitting here on stage with someone who has redecorated the Oval Office before, so I have to ask you how you might critique the new embellishments. And where does that shit come from that's on the mantelpiece?
Wow, that's a hard question.
Caesar's gift shop was like,
You know what? I don't know where it comes from. I mean, I don't understand it. It's weird. I mean, I think the weird thing, I understand, there's a lot I understand. But let's start with what my understanding. I'll finish with the question, but I'm going to answer the question I wish I'd heard first. So, but I think what's interesting about the White House is, again, the initial questions about my obsession with history are that I know the building and I know every iteration of the Oval Office so well. So, and I like looked at everyone's curtain color and everyone's carpet and everyone's, sort of every version of the office. And I think what I tried to do, and the funny thing is, any of you, if you ever get to do the Oval Office, you have to understand one fundamental thing. I mean, you laugh, but someone will, probably, is that it's never, everybody always hates it. Because what happens is, you see the Oval Office, so if you saw what Bill Clinton's Oval Office looked like, it's like bright blue rug, mustard yellow curtains, red and white striped sofas. Right, it looked like a children's birthday party. I mean, it did. And but it's in your psyche, right? You see it, but you see it photographed over and over and over again. So that to you is the Oval Office, right? That to if I ask you to draw apple juice, you know what apple juice looks like, because that's it's like, so it's baked into your head. So the minute anybody comes along and changes it, already it's bad because it's differing from what is in your head. Right? It's different than what you think it's supposed to be. And it doesn't even mean it's good or bad, it's just different. So that was a big shock to me. And interestingly, Arianna Huffington, who's a great friend of mine, had the bravery to say that she called it the audacity of taupe, because it was mimicking Barack Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. And she just sat next to him at a party that I was at, and I was like, tell her about how you hate that she said that. But it's interesting, everybody felt that they could kind of punch holes in it. So, but it came from a deep respect of what the office had been. So in my office, there's sort of stripes on the wall and kind of fabric that was paperback, because in the original building, there's like burlap on the wall. So it had fabric. So my thing is all tied to other things that had happened in the past, right? So what's interesting about this Oval Office is, of course, it's going to be different, and of course, it's going to be concerning. But there is not so much focus on what it was meant to be, right? So the addition of all the glue-on gold stuff is odd to me, but people get to do what they want to do. And the great thing about the White House is it's a living thing that everybody gets to do what they want to do, and the next person will do the same. The only thing, there's a couple things, and I don't know if you guys clocked it, but there's a really beautiful mantle, and then there's like a, you know, like a surround, like a slip. They glued on gold on top of that, which is like, and by the way, somebody, again, you got to love Instagram for telling you about the human condition. Someone figured out that they're from Home Depot. They're like 1485. They're like resin pieces that have then been sprayed gold or whatever and then tacked on. But they're all over the office now, because there was a picture recently of somebody. I was just curious to see, you know, somebody, because I come from having married to an ambassador, seeing ambassadors sworn in, and you can see that they're kind of all over. And that's really wacky to me, right? Because it's like it's a different style. You're trying to make it as something else. But look, that being said, you know, people don't realize, like, the dining room of the Oval Office of the White House used to be, when Teddy Roosevelt, it was all dark wood and had antlers and hunting trophies and stuff. And then there was one iteration, it's lost forever, but there was like a wall of glass that had Tiffany glass in it. Like, so, you know, every White House gets to be evocative of the time. And it's funny, people ask me all the time, well, do you want to go back, and are you upset? And it's like going to it's like being well, let me take it to what it really is like. It's like being popular in high school. I don't want to go back to high school. Like, I had it, I did it, it was amazing at the time, but I left. And so I'm a little more circumspect and less outraged. But look, it's evocative of who lives there, good or bad. It's up to you to decide if you like it.
Another fact of your White House design was that in the yellow oval room, which is in the residence, it's the main drawing room of the family floor.
Cover for the book, yeah, too.
Yeah. And there were traditionally plates in niches there. And there's this moment I recall from one of your books where the plates were going to go in, and there was a confrontation about plates. And can you tell us who didn't like the plates and what happened?
So I've only had two disagreements with Barack Obama. I mean, when he was in the White House. Subsequently, maybe more, but when he was in the White House. So there was a big fight, discussion over what color his curtain should be in the Oval Office. And I was absolutely determined that they should be red. And the reason is behind every portrait, if you ever go to the White House or see pictures, there's like a famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln in the dining room. And it has a swoop of red fabric behind him. And there's a painting of George Washington, swoop of red fabric. And so in those paintings, it was evocative of like passion and determination and, you know, all these sort of high-minded ideas. And I'm like, you have to have red curtains. And there had never been Reagan, because I know every curtain that anyone ever had, Reagan had a kind of, one version was the sort of terracotta curtain or something, but it wasn't red. And so Obama described my response to his questions about it as being strident, which I don't think was positive. But I won, and I got red curtains. So and which, again, to my point of everything you guys think of that office it's in your head. Unconsciously, repetitiously, he's always photographed in front of red curtains. So I won, and it worked, and I'm here to tell the tale. The only other thing is, so we're putting plates in, and in the Oval Office, very much, and in the yellow Oval Room, there are lots of shelves, and there are lots of plates that were made in China, Chinese export from the 18th and 19th century that had the American seal on them. So he said, I don't really like plates. So then I had to really hustle to find stuff that I could put in all these shelves. And the cool thing, it was actually one of the coolest sort of oddities ever, is that, again, it's important to remember everything. So I'd always remembered that the Stearns, who'd founded Sears Roebuck, had given a collection of toys and what used to be salesmen's samples. So you used to be a traveling salesman all over America, and you would travel with these miniatures of like things you would sell, right? Like, I don't know, wheelbarrows and trucks and whatever. And the Stearns had given the Smithsonian this big collection. So I remember, and by the time I was done, the Smithsonian was like, they would hang up on me because like, you can't borrow one more thing. Because I was always like, do you guys have a, thing, Indian baskets, whatever. But so they had all these models, and it was on the sort of edge of, or the cusp of having the leader of India, I can't remember at the time who it was, coming to the White House. And India, they always say, is a country of trains. So I really wanted trains first to put on all the shelves. But they didn't have enough trains, so I took trains and trucks and stuff. And so it was so cool, and it was in those things, and it was right before Christmas, and the girls were still really little. So it was like these toys, and it was really cool. So that stuff was great. That was like a perfect use of a White House that was very much about trying to be, the mandate was be as thoughtful as possible. First, don't do the wrong thing, then be as thoughtful as possible. So there would be these weird things. So he didn't like them in the Oval Office either, the plates. So I did call and got all these American Indian ceramics and stuff and put in the office. And then later, I got calls from this woman, this Navajo ceramicist, who was like, I'm alive, and that was my pot. So there were like things that were just like these weird things that would happen that were so fantastic. There were just as, look, again, going back to your original question, what I think of the Oval Office, every time you move a chair in the White House, it's history, right? It's history's happening in real time. And so in that standpoint, that was really fascinating and interesting.
Another way that your life is integrated into the history of the United States is that your life, it's true, it's like being with an institution here.
Yes.
Your life partner, James Costas, was ambassador to Spain, and you decorated the residence there, and you've done a number of apartments and homes in Spain. So how has your Spanish passage or passages, how have they...
My Spanish past.
Yes, and present, how have they influenced your work going forward?
So interesting. I mean, a lot of you guys been to Spain, or there's a lot of people been to Spain in this room. I mean, I had been to Spain, but I had clearly being there for 4 years for a portion of the time. I mean, everybody thought I was there all the time, and they thought I was here all the time, which was such a trick, right? But I would go back and forth like twice a month. And in those days, there's no direct flight. So I had to go through Frankfurt or whatever. And it was like, I was exhausted and all the time. I was in a perpetual state of jet lag. But it was kind of like, you know when those dolls that have like a skirt and you pull the skirt up and you turn it over and there's another doll underneath? It was kind of my life, right? So I was...
You're scaring everyone.
I know. I mean, I'm just trying to find a visual of how upside down it was. It was a little bit like in Bewitched, where she played her cousin also, and she was different.
I like that. Yeah.
So my life in Spain was totally different than my life here, right? So I was well known in Spain, but for something completely unrelated to who I am and what I did, right? I mean, it was because I was, in the translation, I was the consort of the American ambassador to Spain, right? Which is hilarious. And then James was really pissed because the newspapers in Spain started referring to us as the ambassadors, plural. Now that did not go over well. That was like, right? It's like, no, I'm the famous one. So it was kind of a whole other thing. So and the thing in Spain is, guys know that the biggest thing in Spain is Hola magazine, right? So more people read Hola, or Hello, the English version, but in Spain, Hola, than any other magazine in the history of the world. So I think the average magazine that's produced, even when you were at Vanity Fair in its golden moment, is like 3 to 4 people read the same magazine. In Spain, it's 11 people read Hola. And it comes out every Wednesday, right? And so in Spain, the big thing is like, I would never be in Hola. Oh my God, it's the worst. And so the first time I got like paparazzi photographing me Christmas shopping. I was like, terrible, 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 terrible. Oh my God, terrible. Does this tinsel make me look fat? Terrible. So yeah, and then when you be in the embassy, all the housekeepers and stuff, they would never say anything, but they would mark your page and leave it on Wednesday, like on your desk. So they were like, yeah, like look, you're in it. So again, it was like being in high school. It's another version of high school, which is always good for me. It was my zenith. But I think, anyway, to answer your question, so Spain, the effect of it, I mean, getting to work with all these craftspeople and, you know, there's a royal tapestry workshop, there's a royal glass workshop, there's, you know, all these different things was so incredible. And because I was the consort of the American ambassador, I had full access to all that stuff, right? And in Spain, now you can take photographs. When we lived there, or we still live there, and we still have apartments and stuff there, but you could never take photographs in a museum, but I could because they weren't going to tell me no. So I was like, So, but the great thing about it is it completely, I didn't realize, so silly, growing up in California, and again, everything is Mission Viejo thing. I was like, I didn't know that was all Spanish. I was like, I just thought that was a place where cute water polo kids grew up. You know, I didn't know that was all Spanish. And then you're there like, that's where it came from. So that putting the two together, right, the sort of the beginnings of my childhood growing up around Spanish houses and Spanish architecture and certainly Spanish language. But then this whole other world, I mean, I always say Spain is like darkest Africa. It's completely unexplored and uncovered, where if you go in Italy, you know this because you spent so much time in Italy, I can tell you within a 5-mile radius, every restaurant from Parma to, you know, Venice to whatever. I mean, you know where everything is, where every great restaurant is. Spain is not like that. It's never been super publicized or super covered. So it's like this magical, like you'll go to these incredible hotels that are like things you've never seen in your life, and no one you know has ever been there, right? So it's just still so much discovery. And then just, I think the craftspeople stuff and the ability to get things done that are so beautifully executed, and the fact that it's dwindling, but the craftspeople are still working. I mean, the house there's only been in Sotheby's magazine, but this house that I redid for us in Mallorca has this tile that was made by the restorers in Seville, who restore all the historic 16th, 15th, 17th century tile in Seville. And the guy just retired with no one to take over, so I can't ever get it again. So I mean, but the possibility of recreating things and buying things and finding things was really influenced my work in general. And I just fell in love with Spain. I mean, it's just so the people. I mean, just for all these reasons I described.
If you had to pick one great decorator who was the biggest influence on you, who do you think would be at the end of the day?
Me, no. It all came from me. I don't know, because look, I think the people I worked for, you know, I was John Saladino's assistant, and that was super influential in many ways. How to run a business, how not to run. I mean, I learned so much being thrown into that so young. But aesthetically, I mean, look, I always go to Mongiardino, who I love so much, because for me, what's so interesting, and there's certainly other people who did it, but for me, what was so interesting is this idea of theatricality, creating something, which to many American decorators, until they embraced the Mongiardino of it, it was not perceived as a good thing, right? You were supposed to have correct things, and everything was supposed to be correct. And I think what he broke, which is amazing, is this idea of the creating of a movie set, in a sense, and that being admirable and wonderful. And what a lot of people who've gone on to do Mongiardino things, even people who worked for him, what I loved about him that they don't do is the high-low, which I love, right? The buying Indian bedspreads at Pottery Barn and cutting them up and putting them on the wall, or buying stuff, you know, in the flea market and mixing it, or wicker or straw. Now it's all super expensive, like Bonaccino. But the idea is of really trying to create a look out of theatricality. And again, the adjacency, I was around at the end of when Tony Duquette, who I don't know if you guys know, was in LA, and that was very much the same thing, someone who was very much a theatrical kind of designer, and it could be paper mache, or it could be, but I always loved that, because it felt like somehow more creative, and to say what you said in the beginning, that my houses are immersive, or that they're an experience, that being also a child of the film business, was something that I understood, right? I always think that if I hadn't been a decorator, I would have been a director. But instead of getting to do books or stories, I get to make movies about the people who live there, right? In a way. So I think that was a revelation for me to see, and I really love a cheap thing. I mean, I really love going into like CB2 and finding $5 dishes and buying 50 of them. I mean, I just love that, right? That's so much more exciting to me, to find something that is beautiful and inexpensive and cool than buying. I mean, of course I love buying expensive stuff, but the point is that thrill of finding something that somehow I can repurpose is really fascinating to me. Like the gold at the White House, glued on. See how I brought that back? Yeah.
Speaking of cheap things, how are the tariffs of this minute that might go away the next minute? How are you preparing for that? What do you think is going to be the impact?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm fascinated. I'm almost like, hopefully we're going to take some questions. I'd like to hear other people's experiences. I mean, we're seeing it. It's still early, but I don't know if you guys have seen it. But in terms of like shipping is jumping up. Crazy, right? I'm like, wow, what's happening? And I think a lot of that is because somebody has to collect, like it's just nobody knows what they're supposed to do. So they're gonna have to collect the tariffs and make sure that they pay the tariffs. And so shipping is going up tremendously. I think, we have like Jasper, the fabric company, produces a lot in England, and so it just looks like maybe they brokered a deal today. I think everyone is kind of terrified. And what the worst thing is for all of us, for people in the design business, is things are going to be more expensive and people are going to be pissed off. Because if you bought something 6 weeks ago and it goes up by 25 or 30%, you're not going to be mad at the government, you're going to be mad at your decorator, it's just the way it is. And then the other thing is I think there's going to be, people are waiting, right? There's a frozen quality, right, of, do I buy a house? Do I do the room? Do I, even in my practice, which generally is pretty, foolproof or pretty recession-proof or whatever, my clients are like, we're not going to make any big purchases right now. And, I think we'll see what that happens, but that's not good for anybody, right? So you have two things. You have a hard, it's like driving at 40 miles an hour and just pulling on the emergency brake. So everything is rattled, and then you don't know what anything is going to cost. So you see things like restoration hardware stock, like you just see like crazy fluctuation. Instability is not good for people spending money. It's just not, right? So it's scary to everyone, and I think that it's things people the answer is I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't like not knowing, right? And when you guys ask questions, I want to hear if anyone has an experience that they've dealt with that it's literally affected them.
I think it's really
Bad.
I hear about it all the time. I mean, I'm part of the Makers Alliance, and so I have all these, we're with all these makers in our country, and they're like, they don't understand is that we can't make things here without materials and things to be things from other countries.
Yeah, exactly.
So it just spreads.
No, exactly.
Are we going to take questions from the audience?
Yeah, are you done with your part?
Oh, I don't know. You keep alluding to it.
No. I mean, I just.
You were sick of me.
It was.
I've taken a few critiques on stage.
I was prompting people for the future.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to.
All right.
I wasn't bored yet with your questions.
I see. I want to get back to this doll that is upside down. Just traumatized. Or Endora from Bewitched. How was she an influence on you?
No, I love Endora.
Okay, exactly. I think we could take some questions, and then I can jump in.
Okay, you guys anybody have any questions?
No.
You guys have to just stand up. I think it's probably better.
Yeah.
Unless there's a mic. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna get a mic.
Okay.
You didn't ask me.
Yell. Try yelling.
Okay. How are you dealing with this current circumstance of tariffs and your clients now putting salt on everything? And what do you suggest that the rest of us in Ontario?
I mean, that's a really good question. I wish I knew. I think it's just too early. I don't know. Because the problem with it is, I mean, if anybody's lived through like 2007, 2008, when people, like literally I was with a client, this was funny, this goes back, having lunch at Barney's. Remember when Barney's was here? And my client's husband called and said, don't spend any money, right? Like at Barney's. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh, the market, it's crashing, whatever. As if that really would have made a difference, right? My Tommy Hilfiger sweater bankrupted me. But I think the answer is, having lived through it, it's just awful, because what happens is you don't know what to do, because it's not like, it becomes a psychological thing, right? It's not like, oh, we're going to get the less expensive cravat fabric to the thing. It's literally like, I don't know what, it becomes like this unseen. It's like the scary thing under the bed, like it just becomes intangible, and people, so the answer is there's nothing you can do. You just have to wait it out and see what happens. But, the other thing is, it's like the idea of that you would give discounts to people, or you would negotiate over, that's not going to help, and that's not going to work, right? It's just, you hope that things stabilize, and that you have to realize that if you're unstable, so are infinitely richer people who are going to be much more pissed off and have much more power than you are. That's how I think about it, right? So I hope other more scary people than me try to ask for stability. But it's a really scary thing, because things were going so incredibly well, and this is something that we've never dealt with in our history, where we're just tanking the economy But I think you just have to like stay calm and watch The Crown over and over again, which I do. What I call civility porn. And just try to, but I mean, I really like have problems sleeping too, and it's kooky. I just feel like, I don't know, it's horrible. It's a horrible sort of paralysis when it spreads and it becomes uncool to spend money. It's a terrible, it's really hard. Our business, for the most part, look, it's not medical supplies, and people can afford, to not redo their guest bedroom. You know what I mean? And it's, we all live on that money. So it's something that is real, and I don't think there's much that you can do. I mean, that's it.
Right.
Okay.
Hi, so I apologize. As soon as we started talking about the White House, of course, we're asking you about tariffs, but
Okay.
I'm a vendor, and so I'm wondering what the best thing we can do for designers are, because we're at a standstill right now, and we still don't know what the price of goods is going to look like and if they're going to go up, but what's the best thing we can do for you guys as designers right now?
I just think to stay in communication. I mean, we had a conversation about, because I clearly make fabric and furniture and stuff. Should we send out, what a lot of people have done, have sent out a note to our clients saying, we're in this together, we're going to, as we get developments, we're going to inform you. I just think you just have to stay in touch and tell people, and tell people to call you if they're concerned, because I think, again, the unknown is what's scary, right? So that's what we're just trying to do, but it's going to be hard, and try to tell people there's probably going to be an increase, and we're going to try to deal with it as it occurs. And some vendors in Europe are already telling us, wow, we're going to absorb a percentage of that. We're going to take less profit off our, fabric or whatever. I mean, you can figure out if you can do that, if that works for your business or not. But I think it's just, I think it's just going to take some time. But again, the actual tariffs are one thing, but people not spending money is worse.
Front.
Hi, Michael.
Hey.
Juan, landscape architect.
Hey, how are you?
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, since you are from California,
Uh-huh.
we're talking a little bit about history. What are your feelings now with what did, because we're not only dealing with tariffs here in Cali, but obviously with the Pacific Palisades and
Yeah.
like, how do you see us moving forward as a community here? And what you hear with your massive.
Which my massive ears. I just went to Malibu for the first time like 2 days ago. And I mean, I'd gone to Malibu through the back way, yeah. But I had not gone on Coast Highway. And it's so devastating and kind of awful and just surreal, right? And then I went through the Palisades back the other way. It took me 2 hours. Don't do it. It's terrible. But listen, I think that we're a resilient city, and I think that I think people want to live here, and I think people will rebuild. I think in the initial phase, people were like, well, we're not going to rebuild. I think people are going to rebuild. And, I think there's such an outcry, and there's such a feeling of support and of people really doing wonderful things and trying to, do really big acts of generosity and stuff. And I think you realize in the beginning it's one thing, but now it's gonna, as it continues to happen, it's such a fresh shock. I think people are gonna, we're all giving fabric and things like that, which is minimal and fine. But I think that it will work out because it's a beautiful and incredible place to live. I mean, I just saw someone the other day who is one of my clients who grew up here but lives in New York. It was like a huge house in New York, and was like, I forgot how much I love LA. She was here for a week. And it's, the joke is, the secret is, it's the best place to live. The best place to live. And that's never gonna change. And I think what I hope it creates is that there is gonna be, I'm seeing like architects and people like giving like a discount. I think there's gonna be a desire to return these communities to what they were and to the strength of what they were, right? Look, all the Malibu stuff, expensive houses, those people are gonna be able to rebuild. Altadena, tougher, but I think there's gonna be, like everyone when asked is gonna do stuff. And I think we're gonna correct it, we're gonna fix it, right? Because I think we just all realize how important community is, and especially when there's this other instability in the world, I think you become closer.
Yeah, it's just that we're not hearing a lot of
I think it's so early. It's so early. I think it is a lack of leadership, but I think what also happens, listen, this happens in politics too. It takes a second, right? I think then you just get caught into like the chum of like, everything happening. I think you will. I just think people have to figure it out. It's a huge shock, right? It's a huge blow. And again, in politics, it's the same thing. People would, like I was so intolerant, like what's happening, where's the messaging and everything, and people are like, you just have to give it a second. People have to figure it out and make sure they do things in a strong and orderly way. And I did see stuff being cleared, like driving. I saw Army Corps of Engineers signs and they're clearing. And now, they've made the decision to only remove an inch of dirt, which there's a lot of toxicity. Now it's fast. Is it right? I don't know, but but that's going to speed it up. So I just think there's a lot. I think everyone has to just take a beat and then try to figure it out. We always do, but I had very few clients who lost. I had a lot of smoke damage. And a couple Malibu houses that burned and stuff, but not, thank God, not tons. Like my people were okay for the most part. But it's a shock to everyone. And it's terrifying because you also, if it can be that Gelson's, how could it not be my house? You know what I mean? It's like, it's so weird. Like that should never have burned. Like how's that possible, right? So, but I think all the right energy, and even you asking about it, I think everyone I see, like, we'll all do stuff, right? Well, we just have to be asked and it'll happen, is the question.
Raise your hand if you in the back. Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Michael. Firstly, thanks for this conversation. I wondered, just as someone who works across continents, whether you've got any reflections. Thank goodness there's no tariffs on ideas.
Oh, there will be, yeah.
But as someone who lives and works across continents, any reflection you have on the exchange of ideas between Europe and the US?
It's a good question. I was just in Europe for a week, and I was in Vienna, London, and then I was at our house in Spain, and it felt really good to be there. I have to say. I was like, wow. That president of Spain, man, he's really a piece of work. Yeah, the cross-pollination of ideas. I think, look, I think even though there's attempts to demonize and stuff globalization and, you know, and kind of pit everybody against each other, I mean, the show's over. Like, we're all interconnected with the world, right? Every piece of fabric, everything on the street, everything we buy is made somewhere else. And a lot of stuff is made here. But I think that it's like, you know, ideas, I believe in the strength of ideas and of creativity, and I think that it's silly to think that you can put back that stuff into a box, right? I don't think it works, and I don't even know how it works, right? I don't know how that would even be viable, but I think it's just, I think the world's a wonderful and big place, and I think what is interesting to me, going back, I mean, I'm sort of answering a question, but going back a little bit by a step, I think what's happened in a post-COVID world is it's much harder to do what we all do. I mean, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I believe everyone's in the same position. My first part of the day, till probably noon, is calling people who want money to do something, but don't return my phone call, give me a quote, but like, it's just like there's a kind of lack of let's go thing that it takes so much more energy, right, to get going. And that is one aspect which is really difficult. But the other thing is, I think, the other side, which I think is interesting, is the community aspect of it, of feeling separated during COVID and isolated and all that, which is why it's so weird to try to have a institutionalization of separating us off from other people, from other creative people, from other stuff, from other things that you see and look at, right? Feels so foreign because we want more community and more connectivity, not less, right? We don't want to, we don't live in small towns anymore. And technology is hooking us up with everyone in every way. And I don't mean Pornhub, I mean like actual people, and creatives, right? And things that are being made everywhere in the world. I mean, that's the cool thing. It's like to read Instagram and like to see all these people making stuff in weird places and weird parts of this country, but all over the world. And, you know, it's fascinating, right? That to me is overwhelming. I could spend, you know, every day on Pinterest tracking down the right towel that looks like African matting or whatever. And I do. So I think that, I think it's impossible to put that back in the box. It's so interesting. And people are doing great stuff everywhere, right? And I'm not going to not buy English fabric or Italian wicker. It's just not going to happen. So and I think we're going to kind of overwhelm the boundaries because we want to be connected to people and we want adventure and we want to travel. I mean, it's just how it is, right?
Anyone else? So.
Piggybacking on that.
Okay.
What do you think is missing from the design space?
Oh, that's so interesting. That's a really good question. Missing. I would never be so, you know, narcissistic to believe that I have the answer to that. But from what I feel, I think a lack of bravery, maybe. Or now, look, it's hard to understand. It's hard to know how this happened. But if you go to any house for sale that's been staged or done to sell or whatever, it's all the same fucking house, right? Like it's one contiguous sort of thing, right? And you could say it's a restoration, hardwarization of the whatever. But there's such a sameness, and at the high, it's at the low end, at the high end, right? And I think that sort of bums me out because I think people are so. It's something that I've thought has been around for a long time, which is that people are so frightened to make a mistake that they don't take any chances, right? And I would rather have something bad that I mean, Dinah Vreeland, you know, the very famous editor of Vogue, used to say it wasn't bad taste she objected to, it was no taste, right? And so the reality of it is, I think it's more interesting when people go for it and do something that's personal to them. I mean, I gave a talk can't remember where, but recently somebody was like, I only like white and people shame me. And I'm like, okay, but what color white? Like, what are you talking about? There's like 1,000 whites. So I think that there's a lack of bravery to do things and to be adventurous. And I think that conformity is hard for me, because I think it's just, you know, I want to do stuff that's different. And so what I have happen is that people push back, right? Well, that's too formal. Well, we live informally, and it's like, or the space is too big or whatever. And it's like, space is not a formal thing, right? How you live in it, right? You see people in Italy living in castles with white slipcover furniture and sisal from Pier 1. It's like, it's just how you approach it, what your mindset is. And I think that all the information about design and all the influencers and stuff create a conformity that people think they have to stick to, and I just think people need to do their own thing and not be scared. But it's expensive to make a mistake. It's hard to recover, and I am riddled by terror in my own world for my own stuff, so I can't say that it's not hard to do. But that would be the thing that I think and I think we'd have a lot more creative product and stuff if people were brave enough to go, yeah, I don't want to just do that same thing. I want to do something different. One more question. Quick, go.
Superficial. You mentioned that you were the child of the film industry.
Well, don't you know, because I was a child actor. No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, I just grew up around the film business my whole life. My parents were not in the film business, but I grew up around I grew up next to John Wayne as a kid, and the film business was the ultimate business when I was a kid to be part of, and Matt even was closer to it than I was. But and I just think that gives you a different look. I mean, it's a much longer conversation. I could do a whole other conversation about this, but listen, it's really interesting to see people's idea of what it is to live in an affluent way used to be created by the movies. And then there was a certain moment where it became television. So it used to be like a Fred Astaire movie, and then it became Dynasty, right? And you see a difference, right? You see an actual difference in people who want the double staircase. That's television, that's not the movies, right? And so there's nowhere in the world where our perception of fashion, art, houses is not touched by something that anywhere in the world people have seen television or movies. Just not possible, right?
Thank you all.
Wait, let's ask this one
Sorry.
more.
You said
I know I was trying to be diligent. I just like the question so much more than the talking.
Thank you. So my question is very personal. So Michael, you are a well-known interior designer. You are top 100 Architectural Digest. You made interior design.
Actually, Hall of Fame, but we're not going to get.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes. So you made interior design for stars, for presidents. So how does your life look like? What is your normal day, and does it look like the day of your dream?
Oh, God, that's such a good question, right? What do you think? Does the day, you know what my day looks like. Does it look like a day of a dream?
Dynasty.
Dynasty.
Alexis and Crystal.
Totally. What does it look like? I mean, it does. It is. I mean, there are aspects of my life that and you would be shocked, but literally when I wake up every morning, I'm like, these sheets are so soft. I'm so lucky, like I have such a nice bed. I mean, it sounds really moronic, but that stuff, like I really do. I hate this because it sounds so corny, like a rock that should say it, but I am ridiculously filled with gratitude and ridiculously feel so incredibly privileged in everything. And so I do not take anything for granted. But I do live a very charmed life, but I'm hyper aware of it, and so I'm always, I try to be generous, and but I'm riddled with guilt all the time. I mean, I should sell everything, and I should give it away, like literally all the time. which is my own sense of neuroses. But I think that, again, and going back to this idea of California and even like post-fire, I mean, it is amazing here. And I grew up here, but it still is fascinating to me how beautiful California is and how our connection to nature and being able to be outside and all that. I mean, no ozone layer, but still beautiful. and that is something that I never get over, how beautiful it is here. And so, but yeah, I think to be fortunate and to have the ability to work for the people I do is, it's really weird when what happens to you exceeds what you thought was going to happen. It's weird because it puts you in a weird place. It's like, what do you do now? But on the other hand, you know, you just have to keep going. That's interesting. Do you have any final summations, Matt?
Well, I think everyone in the room wants to know, are the Obamas staying together, or what about these rumors?
They are absolutely staying together. I can tell you because they often stay with me. And it is the most, listen, I'll tell you what I think it is, if any of you guys have followed all the rumors, which is hilarious. I think what happens is we live in a very unstable and scary time, and I think that you want to know where mom and dad are. I mean, I saw somebody at a protest was holding up a sign, which is so perfect. It's like, "Where's Obama? The babysitter scary." and I mean, and it was like, I of course sent it. I immediately sent it to him. I sent it to Obama. But the point is, it's like, I think in a time where things feel really unstable, you go to somebody who you felt was credible and made you feel stable. And so I think because they've been sort of quiet, and as Michelle Obama says to me, I don't travel with my husband for work anymore, right? Which is simple, but she doesn't. And I think because she wasn't at stuff, people think that there's this other thing, right? Which is hilarious. But like this idea that he's like having an affair with Jennifer Aniston, who I just had dinner with, who met him once in 2017 in a ballroom, is like, it's just goofy. But I think it's actually evocative of a good thing, which is they were so correct and kind and good that people still want to know where they are. And the fascination for them still continues. So if you don't see them, you make up stuff because you just want to know. There's got to be a reason you're not seeing, right? So, but they are not getting divorced. You can absolutely, yeah, guarantee. I will guarantee you, they're not getting divorced.
Well, thank you, Michael.
That was
Thank you.
good. Good.